Hello, welcome to the Field of Screams podcast. This is Tyler Singleton, and this is the Maniac Cop Horror Harvest episode. We're going to give this film a brief introduction, and then we're going to talk about the highs and the lows of the film, what makes this film great, what makes this film not so great, what parts are slacking a little bit, and then we're going to talk about a few awards at the end, so stick around. This film was directed by William Lustig. This film has a great two leads in Tom Atkins and Bruce Campbell, fresh off of Evil Dead 2. Now, this is a more straight-laced Bruce Campbell, but you still see some elements of the Evil Dead wacky Bruce Campbell in this film. Now, Bruce Campbell's casting, I think, was really important to this film because for his character, you have to have a really likable actor. About 10 minutes into the film, you find out that he's cheating on his wife. I mean, right from the get-go, his wife is asking him why he has to go on patrol at night so much. She's worried about him. He's screaming in his sleep. And you start to get a sense maybe he might be the deranged killer out on the streets. But he goes out and his wife follows him after getting an anonymous phone call calling him the killer. She goes into this motel which he checks into. You see his police uniform on the floor. And she walks into the bedroom and he's having an affair. Just with that intro, if it were any other actor or some no-name actor, it would have been pretty hard to root for his character. Also in this film, we have Laureen Landon as Teresa Mallory, which is the officer that Jack Forrest was having an affair with. Then we have Robert Z'Dar, who plays Matt Cardell, otherwise known as the Maniac Cop. Robert went on to play the Maniac Cop in all three films of the trilogy. I watched an interview that Robert did in 2012, and he was talking about the three Maniac Cop films, and he's a fan of all three films. The reporter asked him how long it took to put on makeup to play Maniac Cop, and he starts pulling out these pictures of the first one and the second one. He's like, oh, the first one was like a 45-minute process every day, and that wasn't too bad. And then he pulls out a photo from the second film, and he goes, oh, that took about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And one interesting tidbit that he was discussing in the interview was that he actually had throat cancer and he survived that. But then he kind of looks at the camera and he goes, but the reason I survived that is because I'm a fighter and I'm a survivor. A Maniac Cop doesn't go down that easily. And if you're watching the first film, that definitely rings true because there's not a lot of things that bring him down. I've already talked briefly about some plot points of the film, so let's briefly just summarize the plot we got going on here. The film opens up with there's a guy who's dressing up as a cop who's going out on murderous rampages. Lieutenant McRae is on the case and he's trying to find some leads. Once it's established that it's either A cop or B, someone dressing up as a cop, he goes to a reporter and tells her to put out the story to help keep citizens safe. Now this kind of backfires a bit because then people start to become wary of police officers. Our character Jack Forrest starts to become a suspect in the case because his wife was killed while he was having an affair. There's an alibi. Even the police officers are wary of each other and they're trying to figure out what's going on. The rest of the film consists of McRae, Jack, and Officer Mallory teaming up to try to prove who the actual Maniac Cop is and clear Jack's name while bodies pile up. With the plot established, let's get to the segment of highs and lows. The highs, what makes the film tick, and the lows, which of course is the lowest points of the film. Let's start with the highs first. The first high I would say is the story is very well paced. There's not a lot of boring or long shots. The beginning kind of plays out like a whodunit type of movie. It initially has you suspect that Jack's character may be the killer. Even McRae's character. The chief of police brings up that he had an incident in the past right after his partner passed away. And right as he brings it up, McRae kind of stares into the camera, all crazy like. So it gets you kind of suspecting that maybe he might be up to something. We quickly play the whodunit game, but then it turns out that it was none of the police officers. Well, it was a past police officer, but it was none of the police officers that they originally suspected. And then they kind of create the origin story of Maniac Cop as to why he's killing. And then he's on a rampage for the rest of the movie. And again, there's not a down moment in the film. It's very entertaining. To go along with the story, or the pacing of the story, but I would say this film also has a decent message, maybe, hidden deep down inside of it. The Maniac Cop, he originally started out as a really well known cop who did his job really well, but and then politicians who were corrupt, they framed him. He was arrested by his own officers, and then when he was arrested, when he was put in jail or prison, he was killed by inmates. And I can't recall if they said it or not, but it's like he's a product of the system. A common theme whenever someone goes off the deep end is usually it's pointed at that the system has failed the person, and you could say in this movie the system failed Matt Cordell, or Maniac Cop. A couple scenes that I thought that aged very well is when McCrae's talking to the chief of police, and he's telling him that someone's dressing up as a cop, and McCrae says, "How do we know it's not one of our cops?" And he says, "Maybe we need to examine the mental health of all the officers." And the chief just kind of laughs it off and goes, "Oh, okay, I'm just going to check the mental health of our whole police staff." I mean, he just completely writes it off, and he's the chief of police, so if anyone should care, it should be him, but he doesn't in this film. And it's a conversation that's had today that, our police officers do need their mental health checked. That's not an easy job, there's a lot of stress. Another moment is when McCrae tells the reporter to put out the story that someone dressed as a cop is killing people. It cuts to a TV station, they're interviewing people, and there's a scene with one mom, and she says that she tells her kids that when they spot a police officer, that they should go to the other side of the street to where it's safe. Then it cuts to other people, and they're talking about how they feel unsafe when they're near a police officer. Now, when I bring up these scenes, I'm not trying to preach politics or send any type of message. I have family that are police officers. I've been a jailer myself. But I know these are conversations that are had today. Some people just don't like police officers. I know people who don't. They say they feel unsafe near them. And I know different areas, it's different attitudes. And there's been talk that they're going to reboot this film. And they said when they reboot it, it's going to be different than this original one that we're talking about here. So it does make me curious as to what kind of messages they may put in that film if they reboot it. Regardless if the reboot is made or not, though, I would say these attitudes that they portray in the film, it creates tension not only for the citizens, but for the police officers themselves. There's one lady who gets pulled over in the movie, a police officer walks up, and you can tell she's very on edge, her car's broken down, and she reaches into her purse, and she pulls out a gun and shoots the police officer. That was not Maniac Cop, that was just a normal officer trying to help her out because her car was broken down. So there's tension on both sides, and I think that kind of reflects how things are going today. Shifting from the messages to the film to, let's look at the body count. I think there were 20 kills exactly in this film. And of those 20 kills, there's really not all that much blood, which is a good thing for some people. I know other people prefer gore, but there's not a lot of gore in this film. One creative kill that I noticed in the background of a scene whenever Jack is trying to escape from his cell when Maniac Cop is rampaging in the police station is one cop is hung by handcuffs. That was new. I was like, oh wow, that's different. That's different right there. Towards the end of that scene, when Jack and Mallory are trying to make their escape, McCrae is thrown out of a window on top of a car. It took me by surprise completely. I thought he was going to make it to the end of the film. I just sat there and I was like, no, they didn't just throw Tom Atkins out a window. He's still alive, and I waited and he never got back up. He was dead. So a very surprising kill for me. Another scene I want to highlight is the very beginning of the film. A waitress is leaving a restaurant. She's walking down the street all alone. Two guys come out of nowhere and they start mugging her. Now, she basically whoops these guys. She takes her purse, starts slinging them in the head, knocking them over, knocking them to the ground. She dominates that little fight they have. And then she takes off running in the park, and she sees a police officer. You can see where this is going. As she's running towards the police officer and yelling, "Sir, police, Mr. Police Officer, I need help," the two muggers actually kind of walk up really close to both of them, and they're like hiding behind a bench, peeking over it, and they're just watching her run to the police officer. And I'm like, man, these muggers are awful. First they get beaten up, but not only that, they don't run away. They go very close to the girl they just tried to mug, and they're just slowly watching her run to the police officer to tell him what they've done instead of trying to make a getaway. I don't know what these guys are thinking. As the waitress approaches the police officer, he slowly turns, and it kind of gave me Michael Myers vibes, the way he was moving, very slow and almost robotic, very creepy and unnatural for a person to move. And then he ends up strangling her and snapping her neck. Of course, the two muggers who just stood by and watched, they were arrested and they were blamed for the kill. Rightfully so, for being so bad at being bad. And I know I'm highlighting this scene for how he moved, and they used really effective shots of him in the shadows to hide his face that I thought were done really well. And there are a couple other scenes to where they executed this very well also. I know part of the reason is they're trying to hide his identity. They're playing up the whodunit in the beginning of the movie. But I also think it adds a creepy aspect to the movie when you see Maniac Cop. One more scene I want to put in the high category, even though it probably shouldn't be, is the chase scene they have at the very end of the movie. Jack, he's in the back of a paddy wagon, and Maniac Cop hijacks it. He's driving Jack to the pier, and Mallory sees a police officer sitting in a car, and she basically pulls the "follow that car" or paddy wagon, and the police officer takes off in full pursuit, chasing the paddy wagon. Now, this police officer, he is flying down the road, and the scene's just so goofy, I couldn't help but laugh. He's drifting all over the road. There's that typical cliche cop car scene. Whenever cops arrive in a hurry, they always fly up, and they basically get their car sideways. It's like, "Arr!" And like it's almost like they're out of control, but they always like drift perfectly right where they need to be, or their car slides right in the spot where it needs to be. But it's always just they're drifting. They're going so fast, and they don't slow down as they come upon their location. They have to drift there. This cop drifts probably about 12 times during this scene. It is just nonstop of him taking a right turn going 70 miles per hour. He's causing cars to crash. Cars are flipping over. Maniac Cop's hitting cars too. There's just total carnage being left behind as these two are going towards the pier. I was cracking up during this scene. I mean, if I'm going to reward cheesy scenes, I guess I also got to throw in Bruce Campbell, or Jack, I guess I should say his character's name. He, in the final scene, him and Maniac Cop is trying to get away, gets in the paddy wagon again. Jack hops up on the paddy wagon with the door open, and they just have like a fist fight while Jack is hanging off the truck, and Maniac Cop is trying to drive this paddy wagon away from them. Again, it's just cheesy fun. It's nothing artistic, no elevated scenes whatsoever. It's just good cheesy fun. I think when you watch a movie called Maniac Cop that's set in the 80s, you gotta kind of expect those cheesy scenes. I mean, this isn't. If scenes like this were happening in David Gordon Green's The Exorcist, I think there'll be some outrage. But since it's happening in Maniac Cop, it's okay. It's all good fun. Alright, I think that covers the highs. There's some other high notes in the film, of course, but I think it's time for us to go to some low points in the film. Now, towards the beginning of the film, Lieutenant McRae, he starts to suspect that someone in the police station is giving Maniac Cop some intel to help frame Jack. He suspects that it's this lady named Sally, who has been around the police station for a while. Mallory told Sally about the affair. That was the only person she told, because she said she was like a mother hen to all of the female officers there. She took care of them. So McCrae decides to look into Sally. He doesn't really even know Sally. He just, oh, the lady in the brace, and that's kind of how he remembers her. He doesn't know her name, but he soon runs into Sally when everyone else is gone after hours. McCrae brings up Jack and Mallory to Sally, and as soon as he does, she becomes a nervous wreck. It looks like she's almost sweating. Her eyes are darting everywhere. She's like, oh, yeah, we both know them. We should get beers or something sometime. And McCrae kind of gives her a, yeah, and then we'll be inseparable. And it made me laugh. It was a neat little moment by Tom Atkins, though I do think he's putting a target on his back by sending that subtle message there. But I don't think McCrae cares. So McCrae decides to follow Sally when she leaves the police station, and he follows her all the way to the pier. He sneaks in there, and here's the low point in the scene. McCrae is hiding, and he hits an object over. I forget what it is, but he makes a noise. Sally responds by turning around, and she screams, "Who is it? Who's out there? Show yourself! Who is it?" And she pulls out a gun, and she fires 3 or 4 rounds at Tom Atkins' general direction. McCrae is sitting there still hiding, and these bullets are bouncing like an inch from his face, and he is not moving. He's just still kind of crouched down, going like, oh, whoa, whoa. And he's not really moving at all. And to top this cheesy scene off, Sally then turns to Maniac Cop, because that's who she was meeting, and she just kind of goes, oh, maybe I was just a little spooked. It's like, what? No, you're not going to freak out like that and fire 4 bullets if you are not definitely positively sure that someone is out there. Even if she was sure that someone was out there, she's been in the police force for how long? And her first reaction is just randomly fire 4 bullets in the general direction that a noise happens? It just seems very unrealistic. The next low moment is when Jack and Mallory, they escape from the police station after Maniac Cop ravages through there and kills many cops and kills McCrae. So really the only 2 people that were in there that saw anything were Jack and Mallory. So guess who the police blame for destroying the police station? Jack and Mallory. So what do Jack and Mallory do? They go to this high security medical building where I guess where prisoners die. That's where they take the bodies and the coroner's there, and they talk to the coroner who dealt with Maniac Cop. They walk past many police officers while going to see this guy, and you're telling me none of them recognize the guy and the girl. I mean, one, Jack, they thought he was Maniac Cop in the first place, so he's like a well-known serial killer. And now the breaking news story is that him and his girlfriend escaped the police station, and now they're on the run. So no one's going to recognize them in this high security place. The other police officers who have probably gotten a lowdown of this story. I mean, I know they ride a train, so I'm guessing this place is far away from the town to where Maniac Cop destroyed the police station, but it still is very unrealistic. And to top it off, while they're talking to the medical examiner, the coroner calls Jack McCrae, so it kind of tells us that Jack was using McCrae's name as a disguise so he could get in. But then Jack looks at him and goes, "Did you know that McCrae died last night?" And the coroner doesn't question him at all. He just kind of, they go back to Maniac Cop and they talk about him. They don't question who he is. He just kind of shrugs that off, and the coroner's on the defensive. He goes, "Oh, you were never here. I'm not telling anyone that I talked to you guys." And that's the end of that scene. I'm like, no, they would have been caught as soon as they stepped a foot in that facility. I know they have that scene just to give us the lowdown on Maniac Cop, but couldn't they have just had the coroner be at his house and then Mallory and Jack visit the house acting like McCrae? Wouldn't that be a little more realistic of them to encounter the coroner there and then they question him instead of going into this high security place? I digress. The next low happens right after this scene. After Jack and Mallory press their luck with visiting the coroner, they go back to the town, and Mallory goes into the police station to tell the truth. And it's kind of like, come on, Mallory, what are you thinking? Are they really going to believe you at this point? So she goes in and she talks to the chief of police, who the chief of police does not believe her, of course. And he tells her that she's going to be arrested. After he tells her that she's going to be arrested, him and all the other police officers, like in the police station, they decide to leave because it's St. Patty's Day and they gotta go in the St. Patty's Day parade or something. And there's one officer left who's in charge to book her in. Let's just call this guy Officer Greed, because I don't know if they gave his actual name, but the reason why I'm calling him Officer Greed or Officer Greedy is because as soon as the other cops go away, he tells Mallory, hey, come on, sit down for a second. If you know who the Maniac Cop is, just tell me the truth so I can make a quick buck. It's just really cheesy dialogue. And of course she tells him, I'm telling the truth, if you're gonna book me, and his response is, you know, you got a real rotten attitude. And instead of handcuffing her, he handcuffs himself to her. Tell me where you've ever seen a police officer handcuff themselves to someone who is supposed to be arrested. Why does he do this? It makes no sense. And he's telling her that she has a nasty attitude. Hasn't he worked with her? She was a police officer before she ran away. He should know her. And then as they're going down the hall, he keeps going like, oh, this date's just great. I'm left behind with your bad attitude. And of course, Maniac Cop comes and he takes care of him rather quickly. And you know the reason why they had him handcuff himself to her is to create a dramatic scene to where she's got to escape while being handcuffed to this dead cop. I mean, it's a suspenseful scene, but the reasons as to why it happens just aren't realistic at all. Mallory does make her escape, though. She goes to a window, breaks it open, and she gets away. She gets the key from the dead cop, undoes the handcuff, and she starts to climb out the window. Now, while she's climbing out the window, people in the parade are freaking out, like, oh, what's that lady doing? And these police officers on the street, there's about 10 of them, they look up and they see Mallory climbing out of the police station window. And while she's climbing out of the police station window, Maniac Cop is thrashing at her, trying to pull her in. It's a big, huge scene to where you think these cops would run inside the police station building. Well, they look up, they see Mallory standing on the roof of this building that is very hazardous to herself and people below. You see Maniac Cop going after her, and then they look down and they see Jack. And they go, oh, it's Jack! Get him! And they go after Jack instead. Another low point of the film. The last low point I want to talk about for Maniac Cop, it happens during the chase scene, and it happens when Maniac Cop drives off the pier, and they're pulling the paddy wagon out of the water, and it's very beautiful. The beautiful palm trees of New York. Yes, you see palm trees when this movie is supposed to happen in New York. Of course, they're filming in LA, but it was a mistake they overlooked while making this film. Alright, so we've covered the highs, we covered the lows. Let's get to some awards. The first award we'll do is the Golden Tractor Award for Best Character of the Movie, and I'm going to give that to Lieutenant McRae. Lieutenant McRae, I mean, he's on Maniac Cop's case through most of the film. Yes, he's killed, but he does it in vain of doing good, sacrificing himself trying to help other people. He tried to help Sally even though she beat him with a cane, screaming at the top of her lungs, acting like a crazy lady. Every scene that Tom Atkins was in, I found very entertaining. I feel like he stole the scenes in every scene he was in. Of course, I could always give it to Maniac Cop, but I feel like that's almost like cheating. I couldn't give it to Jack because he started off the film cheating on his wife. I consider Mallory. She had some good scenes in the film, but I think overall, McRae was the best character, so he gets to ride the Golden Tractor. The Rusty Tractor Award, the worst character, will have to go to the Greedy Cop. He only has a few lines, but each line's just eye-roll inducing. And his main purpose of the film is just being a heavy body bag for Mallory to drag around while she tries to escape Maniac Cop. So for that, he gets to ride the rusty tractor. The Tumbleweed Award goes to the greedy cop as well when he dies. While he's trying to drag Mallory to book her in, Maniac Cop is hiding in a room. He literally just sticks his hand out and stabs the cop once. The cop falls to the ground. It looks like he's alive for a moment, but and then he's dead and Mallory drags him around. But then Maniac Cop then, I don't know what he does from this moment, because if he wanted to, he could have got Mallory, but for some reason he takes forever to charge her and Mallory gets away. So, plot armor, I guess. The Best Crop Award, the best kill. There was a few different kills that I considered for this. One of them I considered was Maniac Cop mashing a guy's face into wet concrete. That was pretty creative. Also, hanging a guy with handcuffs, also very creative. But I ended up going with the kill when the lady's car breaks down and she mistakes an innocent police officer as Maniac Cop. As she's panicking in her car, she reaches into her bag. I thought it was going to be pepper spray. And then, boom, she pulls out a gun real quick and shoots him. It was very surprising. Even though the kill wasn't done by Maniac Cop himself, I still think this was one of the most effective kills in the film. So I'm going to give it the Best Crop Award. Well, guys, this wraps up the Horror Harvest Maniac Cop episode. Follow the Field of Screams podcast on social media. Thank you for those who tuned in. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time.